Hey third graders, today we're going to work on Module 5, Lesson 6, and in this lesson we use what we know about unit fractions and now fractional form to be able to identify fractions that are bigger than the unit form, which so like bigger than 1/5, 1/4, 1/8. We're going to go into fractions that have more than one copy of the unit fraction shaded so that you can label and show me that you understand how to use fractional form to label all sorts of fractions. Okay, but before we get started, we're going to kind of go backwards a little bit and talk about number bonds. So when we think of a fraction and we're talking about number bonds, we're always going to put one whole in the top because this would be our whole object before it's partitioned into fractions. Now I'm going to give you two different fractions. I'm going to say there's 2/5, and altogether to make one whole I have to have, remember, all of the partition parts. So if a fifth is on the bottom, I would have to have all 5/5. So up here, next to my number 1, I'm going to say, well, if I'm talking about fifths, then one whole equals 5/5. So if I have 5/5 is partitioned into 2/5, what would my other box be? I can think, what do I add to 2 to equal 5? So I would have to have 3/5 in this box. Now, let's say I wanted to compare these two fractions and I wanted to decide what was bigger, what was larger, 2/5 or 3/5. I can draw this out and think about it. So to compare two fractions, I'm going to draw two fraction bars. They have to be the same size. So my strategy for that is to put them one on top of each other so they are the exact same size. And then I'm going to partition them into fifths, both for the 2/5 and the 3/5. So remember, to partition into fifths, I do one less line than I need boxes. So I need 5 boxes, so I'll make 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. I tried to make them as even as possible. And then the trick is, because it's on top of the other shape, I'm going to just kind of carry those lines down so that I have 2 5/5, or I have 2/5 as my unit fraction in each one. Now I'm going to do the top one with my first fraction here, which we said was 2/5. So I'm going to shade in 2/5. I'm going to do 1, 2 shaded, and over to the side I'll label 2/5. You can see that one, 2/5 is shaded. And then you're gonna understand this when you see it a little bit better. If I want to label and shade 3/5, because the number fifths is on the bottom, it makes my labeling and comparing a lot easier. So I can see 2/5 and 3/5 there, and I can see that 3/5 is more of the shape. So because 3 is the larger number, if we're talking about fifths, would you rather have, if I cut my candy bar into 5 pieces, would you rather have 2 of those 5 pieces or 3 of those 5 pieces? I would want 3, that's more. So as long as our number, our numerator, that's our bottom number, as long as that number is the same in both fractions, it's really easy to compare them. We can draw a fraction model like this, or I can just think about 3 is larger than 2. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit more about fractional form and unit form, mostly about fractional form today. So let's start with my circle. You can make one of these. If you don't have a piece of paper or a marker board, go grab one now. If I want to partition a circle into thirds, one easy way I can do that is by making a dot in the middle and then making almost like a wide Y. So if I make a big Y, I'm close to the same size. My pieces maybe needed to be a little bit more stretched out, but now this is partitioned into the unit fraction thirds. Okay, and I'm going to shade in 1/3. Right, this would be fractional form, right? 1 out of 3, or 1 the line and then 3. But let's say I make a copy and take another one of my thirds. Instead of just 1/3, I'm going to shade in another third. So my shape is still partitioned into thirds, but now to tell someone how many of the parts are shaded, I would say, how many thirds are shaded? Well, we're still talking about thirds, So that means my bottom number is a 3, right? That's my denominator, which is always based off of our unit fraction. How many of these thirds are shaded? Here's 1/3 and here's 2/3. So I want to say 2/3, or 2 out of 3 are shaded. Okay, so we're going to go on and try this with another shape. I think this time we'll do a rectangle. I'm going to partition my rectangle into eighths. So I'm going to start by making halves, partitioning my halves in half to make fourths. And then if I want eighths, I'm just going to partition all of those fourths in half by going across horizontally. So now I'm thinking about what's my unit fraction. Well, why does it matter to think about unit fractions? The reason it's important for us to understand the unit fraction, or the number that they're all partitioned into, is so that we can put the right number in that denominator spot on the bottom. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equal parts. I know that that means my unit fraction is eighths. That also means that whatever my partitioning does, whatever shading I do, I'm always still talking about eighths. So eighths is my unit fraction, and this is how I show eighths in fractional form. I put an 8 on the bottom. It's because it's divided into eighths. Now I'm going to shade some of this. I'm going to shade in, I think I'll do this many. So I have how many parts shaded out of my eighths? I have 1/8 plus another eighth plus another eighth. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. So I would label this one 3 out of 8 are shaded, or 3/8. Okay, so this is another reason it's important to understand your unit fraction, because then when you say the fraction, you're not just saying 3 out of 8 every time. You would say 3/8. All right, let's say I shaded in 2 more boxes. So I would say I had 3/8, but then I shaded in 2 more eighths. So now you can see I'm adding some fractions in, and I can do that because my 2 bottom numbers stay the same. I'm still talking about eighths, so it's easy for me to add as long as I stay talking about eighths, as long as my bottom number doesn't change. So now I can see, I can count them, or I can just add across the top. When these two numbers are the same, it's like I'm not looking at them to add. So 2 plus 3 should equal 5. I have to leave up here my label of eighths. So let's see if I'm right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eighths. Okay, so boys and girls, today in your problem set, we're going to take a look at it here for a second and see if there's any surprises. But the whole idea is that you can look at a shape, you'll be asked to partition that shape into a certain unit fraction, and then you're going to show how many would be shaded out of that unit fraction based off of the direction. So for example, if it says, here's my fraction strip, and it will say partition this first into, let's say it says 3/4. Well, the first thing I have to do is I have to make my unit fraction shown on my fraction bar. So I would say, oh, 3/4 means the unit form of fourths, which means that I'm dividing this into 4 equal pieces. So I know I do that by going half and then dividing each one of my halves in half again. So now I have fourths. So now I have this part done, right? And I know that we're talking about fourths. If it says to shade in 3 of those fourths, now this is the easy part because I've already done the work here. I would just shade in, and it doesn't matter which 3. This shows that 3 of the fourths are filled in. Okay? All right, boys and girls, so let's take a look at that work for today. Here we are in our problem set for today. It says, make sure we always read the directions on every slide, whether it's reading or math or whatever. The directions are usually at the top of each page we send you. Complete the number sentence. Estimate to partition the strip equally, then write a unit fraction inside each unit and shade the answer. Okay, so first, this first one's showing you 2/3. So they had to partition their boxes into thirds, and they did that with these white and gray boxes. And then they labeled it with thirds in each box. Okay, and you'll just type it in each box, and we'll go through this first one together. So for letter A here, it says 3/4. So I know my unit fraction is fourths. That means I have to make 4 boxes. Looks like I maybe need to make my boxes just a smidge bigger. Each box has to maybe be just a smidge bigger to fill that in. So that's a little bit trickier, right, than just the thirds, but you can see that I've tried to make fourths there. I've filled in my entire fraction bar. There's nothing left over on the edges because I've made them a little bit bigger. So now your teacher can see that this is supposed to be 3/4. 3 of the 4 should be shaded. So I'm going to put on 3 shaded boxes here. And I'll probably again have to expand this out to reach the end of that box. Now, the part that it's talking about where it says write each unit fraction inside of the unit would be out of 3/4. This is worth 1/4. This one is worth 1/4. Oops, sorry, not a Q. This is worth 1/4, and this one is worth 1/4. But even this one that's not shaded, still worth 1/4. So now I can see that there are 1, 2, 3/4 shaded and 1/4 not shaded. Okay, as we go on down through your work here for the rest of this problem set, you have a story problem to solve. You can use your boxes to help you to make a fraction bar on this one, and then you can type in your answers here, or you can use the numbers down here to make your fractions as well. And then this is very similar to yesterday, except for we're going to make a fraction shaded at the end. So let's do one of these together. So in letter A here, we are going to count the total number of equal parts to find the fraction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So how many equal parts are there? 9. How many of those parts are shaded? So we're looking up here to find that total number of shaded equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So out of the 9, 5 are shaded. What my unit fraction though would be is back to, are we talking about thirds, halves, fourths, fifths, sixths? So if it's divided into 9 equal parts, we're talking about 1/9 or 1/9. This represents ninths here. So then we're talking about our fraction shaded. Out of the whole 9, we said 5 out of 9 were shaded. Okay, so that's the last part, boys and girls, of our work. Today you're going to do a couple pages of that and show me that you are understanding how to do fractional form of shaded amounts that are more than 1. So I think you'll do a great job. Please let me know if you have any questions, or let your teachers know if you have any questions, and I will see you again tomorrow.